nothing feels real. I can't really trust anything. They disappear, they can't speak, they can't communicate. The impulse to just run and flee, or just freezing and not being able to act or communicate. People can be labelled as quite problematic, not responding to treatment, not getting better. Hello everybody, I'm Catriona Morten. I'm a sensory-motor psychotherapist. Today I'd like to talk to you about the hidden world of trauma and dissociation. But before I get into that, if you're enjoying these videos, then please give us a like and subscribe to the channel, because it really helps us get a message out there to loads more of you. The reason that I've said the hidden world of trauma and dissociation is because you can't see it, it's not visible. Maybe when it's the symptoms and the affect are quite extreme, then, some of those things, they're visible. But in the main, people with trauma and the symptoms of trauma and how it affects people day in, day out, a lot of the time, it's invisible. When we break a leg, break an arm, even if it's not in a plastic cast, everybody gets it because it's visible, you can see it, everybody understands. Oh, you've broken your leg. Oh, how did you do that? But even although they might know that we've been through some traumas, because you can't see it, it all goes on in your brain and your nervous system, inside of your body. Nobody gets it. And people that have had trauma for a long period of time, they get really good at masking the symptoms, masking the way that it's affecting them, having coping mechanisms, finding ways to disconnect from things, and will go out of their way to not show it, to look completely okay. And that kind of facade, it's really believable, it's really, really good. The other thing that keeps it so hidden is that we're not taught. This all goes on. Your nervous system's in here, woven through your body. Your brain's inside your skull. We're not taught how to pay attention to our body, listen to our body, and have that kind of translation of the internal world and the external world. So it can feel almost impossible to try and describe how this is feeling and how it's affecting them. And because it's invisible, and people that have no understanding of trauma and no experience of trauma, they don't get it. It's like, well, how can that be? Well, why would you feel scared? There's nothing to be scared about. And the way that it manifests itself, and there's lots of different ways that happens. It depends on what's happened to us, as to what kind of triggers we're going to have, and what kind of effect we can have. I've seen people with severe trauma and dissociation that do go into a really, really shut down place. They disappear, they can't speak, they can't communicate, and they're just in a really, really terrified, quiet, almost kind of catatonic or comatose place. But for the rest of the time, they might not even be aware that a part of them is dissociated. It might only make them go completely numb or take a bit of a step back from reality, disconnect from their body, and just feel like they're kind of there, but they're not really there. Or they're aware of things, but they can't really see them. They can't really take that information in. Or just that sense of nothing feels real. I can't really trust anything. And, not really wanting to go out and do anything because it just all feels too scary. And very often what happens is, because it's so difficult to translate, and because we get all these different coping mechanisms that manifest themselves in different ways, then all of these symptoms, all of these things, all of the effects of the trauma can get many, many different labels. I've had people coming to me that have had different doctors, different psychiatrists, different therapists, and they've had a load of different diagnoses. And sometimes people will get one diagnosis and they'll get another one on top of that. And while that might describe the symptoms, and it might describe some of the ways that this affects people and limits their life, it doesn't really describe at all what's going on inside. and we can be told we have X, Y, and Z because we have these symptoms, but the actual trauma can get completely missed. And this invisible world, this invisible thing that goes on, and we feel it, we're affected by it, we sense it. It has a massive impact on the way that we behave, the way that we interact, so many different ways. But so many people come to me, and the traumatic part of their life, the way that the trauma has impacted on them, it hasn't even been kind of discussed, or it's not even been attributed to what they're experiencing and how they're suffering today. And so often when people come to me, that's why I say, well, we'll leave the diagnosis at the door and then just kind of see what's going on inside of here. Because that really doesn't describe the person's experience of the world and experience of themselves. And because trauma is very misunderstood, and there's just not enough information out there. When I was in the NHS, many of the doctors, some of the psychiatrists, they weren't trained. They didn't understand trauma, how it affects the brain and how it affects the body. And so if we're going to see someone who really doesn't understand trauma, but maybe can read symptoms and do diagnostics from the symptoms, then they get other labels, not just a diagnosis, but they can get labels of being oversensitive, or being a hypochondriac. This is psychosomatic, which can be true in a lot of ways, but sometimes a person takes away, you're kind of making this up. If you get your thinking straight, then you won't feel like this. And, people can be labelled as quite problematic, not responding to treatment, not getting better, because actually what's happening to them, the root cause of this, isn't being treated, and it isn't being taken into account, and it's not understood. The other thing that I know a lot of my clients find very difficult is when they do try and explain to someone how this is for them, how their life is, how everyday life is a struggle, or the things that they find incredibly difficult. Often people will say, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I have the same thing. Yeah, I'm not so keen on busy places either. While the person is trying to relate and trying to connect and trying to be empathic and understanding to the person that's suffering from trauma, that's a normal reaction to things, and that's a choice in a lot of ways, and just a kind of like and a dislike. It's not terrifying, and it's the intensity of the feelings, it's the intensity and the suddenness of the fear, the impulse to just run and flee, or just freezing and not being able to act or communicate. Those things they're on another scale. They're up massive levels to just a kind of discomfort. And while it's good that people try and relate, it can feel very invalidating. And a lot of people with trauma feel that nobody gets it. They're on their own with it, that they don't understand. Nobody's like them. And that's really isolating. And it was one of the reasons that when everybody would come into the clinic that's got trauma, although it could be very problematic, at least everybody there got it, and all the therapists got it. They didn't have to try and explain themselves, this unknown, difficult to put into words thing that they're suffering. Everybody got it because they all had trauma. The thing to remember is that a triggered response that might not come with images, intrusive memories, or any flashback. Sometimes it is purely a body sensation. It's purely the breath shuts down, the stomach contracts, our whole core disappears. We might go really, really in a frozen still state and actually be freezing cold. Other parts might shake and tremble. It's a direct line to whatever happened to us. And the way that the things that we've been left with, the way that that's impacted on us, we feel it. And it comes up in a nanosecond. And it can help have an understanding of what happened, but if we don't know, if we have no memory, the body holds it. It's showing up, it's telling its story, it's narrating its experiences. And unless we're able to work with it, then we're not going to understand how that has affected the body in all of these different ways. What story the body's telling. It's not just trying to make people's lives difficult for the sake of it. And it can look and feel different to everybody. I'm very familiar with it, and I know the kind of things to look for, and I'll sense things changing, and I'll sense people's bodies going still and them just getting a bit distant, maybe not being able to give so much eye contact, the breath just going very small and quiet. But often these things can be very hard to spot if you don't know what you're looking for. The only way to know exactly how your body has been impacted and how your body expresses its traumatic responses is to learn to tune in, listen, wake that connection up. And when we can do that, then we can hear and feel and listen and observe what the body is telling us. And unless we can do that and learn to tune in and follow the body, then it's going to be really hard to know what's needed and what's going to be helpful in those moments. And this is something that I've done previous videos on, and we'll do subsequent videos on, and I'll go into that in a, really how to do this in a much more detailed way. So if you think that that's helpful, then have a wee look through some of the videos we've done and have a, heads up for some that we're going to be doing. And I'll help you, I'll talk you through and go through this with you of, well, how do I begin to do that? How do I begin to listen to what my body's telling me? How do I know what it is? It's not rocket science, and it's fairly straightforward, and it makes a massive, massive difference, both to being able to help treat trauma and know what things need to happen, how to process, how to have an experience. It's a new experience of these things that are coming up, and not just into that old loop of this is what happens when I'm traumatized, and this is the way my body goes. So I really hope this has been helpful, useful, interesting, and if it has, then please give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon. Okay, bye.